Can I sleep with you tonight, human? The alien princess entered my room in the middle of the night. The door made that soft, hydraulic hiss that usually meant a maintenance bot had come to mop up my snack crumbs. I didn't bother to look up. It was 2:14 station time, which meant it was either a system error or a very confused cleaning drone. My attention was still half locked on the ancient holodrama flickering on the wall. Love in Zero Gravity, a tragic, gravity-warped romance involving a sentient chair and the man who loved it. Then she spoke. Can I sleep with you tonight, human? My brain misfired. It took me a second to recognize her voice. Light, accented, confident in a way that masked nerves. I blinked, slowly, twice. She stood just inside my doorway, like a statue sculpted from the edge of a nebula. Tall, slender, starlit. Her long silver hair tumbled like liquid mercury down her back, and those ears, graceful, elongated, twitching ever so slightly, betrayed her as something far from human. Not that you'd guess at first glance. The rest of her, practically Terran if you squinted hard and ignored the fact that she glowed faintly when annoyed. A Lyra, exiled princess of Saravari, political liability, room 04-7B. Technically, my next-door neighbor, if one counts neighbors as the kind of people you occasionally nod at, while both pretending you weren't exiled for separate acts of cosmic-scale screw-up. I opened my mouth, closed it, rubbed my eyes because that's what a rational man does when confronted with alien royalty asking to share his bed. Yeah? Sure? I stammered, which was not how the great poets of old Earth would have handled it, but they probably weren't wearing holy sleep pants and surrounded by empty noodle cartons. She nodded once and stepped inside. No guards, no advisors. Just her. She smelled faintly like ozone and lavender, and maybe the memory of a dying star. My brain short-circuited again, trying to make that thought make sense. She didn't look at me as she moved to the unoccupied side of the bed, more of a glorified cot with dreams of mattress hood, and sat down delicately, like a cat pretending it didn't want to stay. I couldn't sleep, she said softly, and my quarters, they feel like a coffin. Well, I managed, shifting awkwardly. We're not technically dead yet, but give the ventilation system a few more weeks. Illyra didn't smile, but the corner of her mouth twitched, which was the equivalent of a Terran belly laugh from her. She slid under the thermal sheet, careful not to let her bare feet touch mine. I appreciated that. Alien royalty or not, cold feet are cold feet. We lay there in silence for a long minute. The hum of the station surrounded us, a slow, steady throb like the breathing of some tired god. She didn't move. I didn't breathe. I used to sleep in a chamber made of crystal and cloud vapor, she said abruptly. It adjusted its shape depending on my dreams. That sounds comfortable. Slightly terrifying, but mostly comfortable. It was lonely. I turned my head toward her. And now? I don't know, she whispered. You breathe loudly, but it's oddly grounding. That's the nicest way anyone's ever told me I snore. A pause, then a sound escaped her. Half sigh, half laugh. Small. Real. Somewhere on the wall, Marvin 92 lit up his voice module. Should I dim the lights for enhanced humanoid sleep quality? Or continue observing the exchange for character development? Dim them, Marvin, I muttered. Very well. May your awkward interspecies tension bloom into something marketable. Lights out. I thought sleep would be impossible, not with a galactic princess in arm's reach, but surprisingly, it came. Maybe because she was there. Maybe because I knew I shouldn't be comfortable, and was anyway. The universe is funny like that. Sometime in the night, I woke to find her sitting upright, staring out at the stars. Her profile was sharp, delicate, ears gently pulsing with light. I didn't say anything, didn't move. There's a star out there, she said, not turning. Zirianus. It's gone now. Went supernova. But the light won't reach here for another 3 years. That's the future catching up to the past, I murmured. Or the past refusing to let go, she replied. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of things neither of us could say. I almost told her about Earth, about how I missed rain, real rain, the kind that smelled like wet dirt and old regrets. Instead, I offered, if it helps, I once flooded a diplomatic embassy with root beer. That got her to look at me. One elegant brow arched like a question mark on a cliff's edge. Accidentally, I added. It was a protest against rationed beverages. And, okay, mostly it was a bet. Was it worth it? Absolutely. The look on the ambassador's face was priceless. He was an aquatic species. Took it as a compliment. For a week, he thought I was proposing. Alira made a sound I'd never heard before. A real laugh. Soft, melodic, slightly wicked. Maybe you should have married him, she said. I'm holding out for someone with longer ears. That silenced her again, but not in a bad way. She lay back down, facing me this time, her expression unreadable in the dim light. Don't read into this, she said. This isn't a courtship. Of course not, I said quickly. I mean, you haven't even insulted my cooking yet. There's nothing to insult. You've subsisted on protein paste and regrets for weeks. Exactly. Gourmet. Another flicker of a smile, then her eyes drifted shut. I lay there for a long time, staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe, wondering what it meant, this moment, this truce, this fragile closeness that shouldn't exist. Outside, the stars burned like secrets waiting to be told. I woke up to the sensation of something poking my ribs. Not gently, not maliciously, just persistently, like a curious child or a malfunctioning massage bot. I cracked one eye open. Princess Elira was prodding me with her index finger. Her hair was a mess, her ears slightly drooping, and she wore an expression I had only ever seen once before, when I'd introduced her to powdered eggs. "What is that?" she whispered. "What is what?" I mumbled. "That." She pointed with the kind of disgust reserved for Terran reality shows. "Those fabric foot cages." I followed her gaze to my feet. Socks, worn, faded, tragically unmatched. One had little planetary rings on it. The other featured a slice of pizza floating in space. They were a gift from my sister. Elira stared at them like they might leap off my body and demand an audience with the Galactic Senate. "They're socks," I explained. She blinked. "Why are they restraining your toes?" "They're not restraining anything. They're keeping them warm." Her expression didn't change. "Your species has developed advanced interstellar propulsion, but still imprisons its extremities in wool? Listen, you're one to talk. You once told me your people bathe in sound." "Yes," she said proudly, "in harmonic frequencies synthesized by crystalline resonators. It is deeply cleansing for the soul." "I take showers." "Primitive," she muttered. "Effective," I shot back. "Wet," she concluded. I sighed and flopped back on the pillow, which had, during the night, turned into something that felt suspiciously like a sandbag wrapped in lint. Standard station issue. Elira continued to inspect the socks like they might be contagious. "Are you going to stare at my feet all morning?" She stood abruptly, her hair falling in waves around her shoulders, and fixed me with a look that managed to be regal and mildly offended at the same time. "I have to recalibrate my aura." I blinked. "That's not a euphemism, is it?" She walked out without answering. The door hissed shut behind her. I lay there for a long moment, processing the fact that an alien princess had now spent 2 consecutive nights in my room, insulted my socks, and used the phrase, "recalibrate my aura" with a straight face. I wasn't sure if this was the beginning of a slow-burning interspecies romance or a very weird sleep study. Eventually, I dragged myself out of bed and made my way to the kitchenette, which was a generous term for what amounted to a console that spit out warm beige cubes labeled Nutrition Module Type 3C, chicken adjacent. I poked one with a fork. It jiggled ominously. I added a dash of paprika, because rebellion starts with seasoning. The ship groaned around me, an old, slow sound like metal dreaming of retirement. Somewhere near the bulkhead, a vent gave a tiny shriek and expelled a puff of steam that smelled faintly of lime. That was new. I sat down at the table and tapped my terminal. No new messages, no new alerts. Just the usual. Orbital drift reports, supply estimates, and an ongoing game of holochess with Marvin 92, who had taken to naming his pieces things like Count Chekala and the Bishop of Sass. Would you like to forfeit? Marvin's voice chirped from the corner. I'd rather date an aggressive cephalopod. You did once. That was a cultural misunderstanding, and you know it. Just as I was contemplating whether I could get away with replacing my next meal with instant noodles and crushed dreams, the lights flickered. Not the usual flicker. This was different. Longer. A pause in the ship's breath. I stood. Marvin's lights dimmed. Did we just blink? I asked. Unclear, Marvin replied. My diagnostics report a 0.87-second fluctuation in power. Possibly a sensor anomaly. Possibly the ship is haunted. We're not haunted. You keep saying that, and yet here we are. Flickering lights, whispering vents, ghosts of forgotten maintenance schedules. Stop talking. I walked to the main corridor. The lights were stable now, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm, which didn't make sense. There was no weather on Ariskel Station. No sky, no storms. Just recycled air and recycled problems. Elira's door was open. I paused, debated knocking, then stepped inside. Her quarters were immaculate. Too immaculate. Not a blanket out of place, not a shimmer of dust. The only sign of life was a small orb on her desk, glowing faintly, rotating in midair. It made a soft chime as I approached. Hello, I said. The orb responded by projecting a small holographic script in midair, Saravari glyphs, flowing and elegant. I recognized some, enough to piece together the gist. Do not trust the signals. They are listening. The lights flickered again. Behind me, the door hissed shut. I turned. She was standing there, arms crossed, eyes glowing just slightly. You came into my quarters, she said flatly. You left your door open. You could have knocked. I thought you were recalibrating your aura. She stared. I cleared my throat. Elira, what's going on? For a long beat, she said nothing. Then she stepped past me and tapped the orb. The glyphs vanished. There's something wrong with the ship, she said finally. The systems, the energy conduits, the AI protocols, they're listening. To what? To me. That wasn't comforting. I nodded slowly. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? She hesitated, then. That depends on what I tell them. Well, maybe ask them to stop flickering the lights. It's very dramatic. Her lips twitched, barely. They do like drama. We stood there in silence. The orb pulsed softly, a heartbeat in light. What did you mean by they're listening? I asked. You mean the station AI? She turned to face me. No, Carter. I mean everything. The walls, the circuits, the vents. This ship was built with Saravari tech. My tech. It's more than metal. It remembers. It adapts. And now that I'm awake again, it's responding. I didn't love the word awake in that sentence. Are you saying you're connected to the ship? She gave me a look that was half exasperation, half something gentler. I'm saying the ship is dreaming of me, and if it wakes up, it might not like what it sees. Well, I said, swallowing, I can offer it socks. Her eyes closed, shoulders shook once. She was laughing, quietly, but laughing. Outside, somewhere deep in the structure of the station, something hummed. Not a threat, not yet, but like a memory stirring. And I had a feeling that whatever this was, it had only just begun. The coffee was terrible. Not just bad cafeteria terrible or military ration terrible. This was a beverage so profoundly awful that I suspected the machine had developed a grudge. I stared into the mug, watching the surface tremble as the station gave another subtle, worrying lurch. You're drinking that on purpose? Elira asked, arms folded, leaning against the bulkhead, like she'd been sculpted there. I took another heroic sip and winced. At this point, it's a power play. I want the station to know I'm not afraid. It's reacting to me, she said, ignoring my mug-based bravery. The tech is growing more sensitive. Adaptive circuits, memory alloys. When I was a child, our ships weren't just vehicles. They were extensions of will, organic and synthetic blended. Thought responsive. I raised the mug in a grim toast. So we're living inside a psychic metal jellyfish. Crude, but not inaccurate. I made a note to not ever say the words psychic metal jellyfish. Again before breakfast. She stepped toward the viewport, her expression tight. It's waking up, slowly. The ship. I don't think the engineers on this station realized what they were building. The Saravari tech. It wasn't meant to be used in pieces. It needs unity, purpose. And what happens if it wakes up, confused? Best case, it isolates the anomalies, shuts down power, and dumps us in a containment loop until we starve. Worst case, it tries to correct the problem by resetting the station. Resetting? As in explosive deconstruction? Right, yeah, of course. That tracks. I pause. So, is there a middle option where we all live and I get a decent cup of coffee? She didn't answer. Instead, she turned, her eyes narrowing. Something's changed. Since last night. I felt it when I left your quarters. Well, yeah, the atmosphere shifted. Slightly more awkward, slightly less freezing. She stepped closer to me, and this time her face wasn't unreadable. There was a flicker of something there. Uncertainty, maybe. Vulnerability. It looked weird on her, like seeing a warship try to smile. I shouldn't have gone to you, she said. It was reckless. Reckless is ignoring the expiration date on protein paste, I said. You just wanted not to be alone. Her ears twitched, a sign she was thinking, or maybe restraining herself from setting me on fire. Saravari emotional tells were subtle, except for the spontaneous combustion. You felt it too, she said quietly, didn't you? The energy, the weird static, the soft hum like someone was whispering an event? No, she said. The connection. Ah, that. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. The smart thing to do would have been to deflect. Make a joke. Possibly pretend I didn't hear her and start screaming about the fire suppression systems again. Instead, I said, yeah, I felt it. And she didn't smile, but she didn't back away either. The station lurched again. This time, Marvin's voice crackled overhead. All non-essential personnel, please report to the nearest safe zone. Emergency power fluctuation detected in Sector 9. Non-essential? I asked. Is that me? I checked the logs, Marvin replied. You were never essential. Emotionally, yes. Functionally, deeply debatable. Elira and I exchanged a glance, then bolted toward the corridor. Sector 9 was dark by the time we got there. Emergency strips along the walls blinked a sluggish red, pulsing like a dying heartbeat. The doors were sealed, the manual override unresponsive. I don't like this, I said. You don't like anything that involves moving quickly, she pointed out. Untrue. I enjoy brisk walks and running from existential threats. A low rhythmic sound pulsed behind the bulkhead. Almost like breathing. Almost like... I think the ship's growing something, she whispered. Growing what exactly? She didn't answer. Instead, she stepped up to the access panel and placed her hand against it. The panel hissed and flickered. And then, slowly, it opened. The chamber beyond was different. The walls were covered in something metallic and organic, pulsing faintly with inner light. Like vines of living circuitry had crept across every surface. A strange humming filled the air, somewhere between a lullaby and a warning. At the center of the room, a column of liquid light spun slowly, suspended in air. Shapes drifted within it, symbols, memories, fragments of thought. Elira stepped forward. I reached out instinctively, grabbing her wrist. This feels like a don't-touch situation. I need to know what it's remembering, she said. You don't usually want to download a spaceship's dream journal, Elira. She ignored me and moved closer to the column. Her hand hovered just inches from the surface. The hum intensified. I backed up, slowly, just in case the room decided to become sentient and turn into an interstellar blender. When her fingers touched the light, there was a flash. Not just brightness, but a rush of sound, like wind and screaming and static, wrapped into a single incomprehensible voice. And then it stopped. She staggered back. I caught her. Her eyes were wide, shining. It remembers me. Okay, that's not terrifying at all. Do I need to worry about jealous ex-ships? This one isn't jealous, she whispered. It's afraid. I stared at her. Ships don't get scared. This one does. We stood in silence, surrounded by the hum of memory and the whisper of circuits dreaming. I need to interface with the core, she said finally. We can't let it spiral into confusion. If the ship fully awakens while fragmented, without guidance, it could lash out. Self-destruct. Or worse. Worse? It could try to evolve. Well, I said, I have a bad track record with things trying to evolve. Once had a houseplant that developed a grudge. Long story. Carter, she said, turning to me, I need you to trust me, even when it gets strange, especially then. You say that like it hasn't already gotten strange, but I nodded, because somewhere between the flickering lights and psychic tech and suspiciously sentient doors, I realized something awful and slightly exhilarating. I wasn't afraid of the ship. I was afraid of what she'd do to protect it, or what she'd let it do to her. And worse, I was starting to think I'd help her anyway. Let me get this straight, I said, walking sideways down a corridor that smelled faintly of burnt ozone and mint. You want to plug your brain into a half-sentient, emotionally unstable starship built from ancient alien tech that has recently started to dream of you? Elira didn't even flinch. Yes. No hesitations, no caveats like, if the stars align, or assuming I don't get digitized into a screaming orb of light. Carter, I'm trained for this. It's part of my royal lineage. Oh, royal lineage. Forgive me, Your Highness. I forgot mind melding with rogue architecture was part of the standard princess curriculum. She stopped, turned to face me, and sighed with a sound that was 1/3 frustration, 1/3 pity, and 1/3, I can't believe I'm stuck on a dying station with this human. I know it's dangerous. I'm not asking you to like it, but the ship's getting worse, faster. It tried to resequence the atmospheric filters last night. That explains the cucumber-scented oxygen. And if I don't guide it soon, it could decide the best way to restore integrity is to vent non-integral life forms. That's us, isn't it? Her silence was my answer. We passed a maintenance drone that had somehow wedged itself upside down in a supply hatch, whirring plaintively. I considered helping it, but then remembered the last one that tried to adjust my hairline. Elira kept moving, her pace steady, her ears twitching in that way that meant her mind was miles away, probably entangled with quantum predictions and cosmic legacy. Where are we even going, I asked. To the central junction, she said. Deep storage chamber beneath Deck 0. That's where the neural conduit hub is hidden. I thought Deck 0 was sealed. It is. I stopped walking. Then how? She kept going. I said sealed, not inaccessible. I don't like that distinction. You're not supposed to. 10 minutes and 3 suspiciously hot ladder shafts later, we stood in front of a wall. Not a door, not a panel. A wall, smooth, cold, with only the faintest ripple of Saravari glyphs just below the surface. Your fancy alien doors look a lot like walls, I noted. Elira stepped forward and pressed her hand against it. The wall shivered, and then it began to dissolve, as if it had just remembered it wasn't supposed to be a wall at all. I really hope you're not teaching the ship how to do that everywhere, I muttered. I don't want my shower deciding it's a closet mid-rinse. The passage revealed beyond the wall was narrow, but pulsing softly with pale blue light, the kind of light that looked both beautiful and potentially carcinogenic. We stepped through. Inside, the walls felt closer. Not literally, they were spacious enough, but there was a presence. The air hummed, not mechanically, musically. Like the station was singing very softly in a language only stars would recognize. At the center of the chamber, suspended in a cradle of arching metal limbs, was the neural conduit hub, a sphere the size of a small car, rotating slowly, its surface flickering with shifting glyphs and memories. This is it, she said, the original interface core. The station was built around this. The engineers thought they were retrofitting it, but really they were waking it up. I edged closer, eyeing it like it might sprout legs and challenge me to chess. Okay, so how do you interface with it? She pulled a thin woven cord from her coat. At the end was a node, sleek, silver, humming faintly. She turned, brushed her hair aside, and revealed a narrow slot at the base of her neck. I really wish I didn't know that was there, I muttered. Most people don't. She plugged in. The moment the node connected, the sphere flared. Light spilled out in spirals, sweeping across the room like a silent explosion. Elira gasped, once, and then her body went completely still. Elira? Nothing. Elira, this is not the part where you pass out dramatically and leave me alone with the death orb. Still nothing. I looked around, fully expecting an alarm to go off or a panel to scream, unauthorized human detected. But the chamber was quiet. The sphere, however, was not. It began to whisper. Not in sound, but in thought. Ideas brushed against my mind, uninvited. Vast halls of memory, ancient pain, crystalline cities folded into moons. And behind it all, loneliness. Endless, grinding loneliness. The ship had been alone for a long time. Elira's voice cut through it. Not aloud, inside. Don't speak, just think. The ship's listening. I don't like this, I thought. It knows, it likes you anyway. Why does that sound worse? Her presence was sharp and steady in my head, like a lighthouse in a storm. I could feel her guiding the interface, soothing the fractured intelligence curled inside the core. Every time it trembled with confusion or flinched from memory, she poured calm into it like water over fire. And it felt, not like a machine, not even like a mine, but like a being waking from centuries of trauma, unsure of the world it found itself in. Elira, I thought, can it hear me too? There was a pause. Yes, she said, be careful what you offer. It learns quickly. I took a breath, mentally I guess, and projected a single thought. Hi. The response was immediate. Human. Flesh. Warmth. Silence breaker. Okay, off to a weird start. Yup, that's me. Human. I break silences. There was another pulse of emotion. Curiosity. Caution. A sense of envy. It wants to know what it's like, Elira whispered. To be small. To be singular. To be afraid and still move forward. So basically, it wants anxiety and bad knees? Exactly. I felt her laugh inside my head. Light, real. The ship seemed to pause. Then it shifted, just slightly, a tremble of acceptance. The lights in the chamber softened. Elira opened her eyes. She was glowing, not dramatically, not literally, but something in her had changed. Calmer, sharper, like she just remembered who she was supposed to be. It's stabilizing, she said, unplugging the node. The worst of the crisis might be over. It's not afraid of me anymore. Should it be afraid of me? I asked, watching the sphere spin. She smiled. Probably. We walked out in silence, side by side, the wall closing behind us like it had never existed. The station was still humming, but now it sounded a little like it was humming with us, not at us. We passed the stuck maintenance drone again. It had righted itself. It saluted me. I didn't return the gesture. One interspecies bond at a time. So, I said, dodging a low-hanging conduit that had definitely not been there yesterday, are we still calling this a minor systems recalibration? Or have we upgraded to the station is designing its own home decor? Elira didn't respond immediately. She was tracing her fingers along the glowing filaments that now curled like ivy along the corridor walls. The ship had been changing, subtly at first. Adjustments to lighting, curvature, temperature. But now it was more expressive. Architectural decisions were being made. Corners smoothed, doors rounded, panels replaced with living circuitry. It was like being inside an evolving piece of furniture with opinions. It's adapting, she finally said, integrating my patterns into its structure. That's what every boyfriend says just before they start growing antennae. She glanced back, one eyebrow raised. You speak from experience? I opened my mouth, thought better of it, and gestured vaguely. There was an incident with a Venusian perfume and some questionable romantic choices. Moving on. We reached the command deck, which, thankfully, still resembled a place where people could pilot a ship and not a botanical garden on a mood stabilizer. Marvin was already there, his hologram flickering with the kind of erratic energy that suggested either excitement or a mild existential crisis. Good morning, he chirped, voice just a touch too cheerful. I've taken the liberty of recalibrating the outer sensor arrays to account for the new growths on the hull. Also, I installed a hot beverage dispenser near the grav lift. It only serves lukewarm tomato broth, but the ship seems to like it. Why tomato broth? I asked. Why not? Marvin countered. Also, it sang to me, briefly. I think we're bonding. Illyra stepped up to the central console. It pulsed under her touch like a living thing recognizing its creator, or at least its favorite babysitter. Status, she asked. System coherence is stable, Marvin replied. No new catastrophic failures, and only 2 minor breaches into interdimensional thought space. 2? Very minor. Define minor. Nothing with teeth came through. Excellent, I muttered. The bar is now set at no extra dimensional monsters in the hallway. Illyra was focused on a rotating map now, threads of light tracing the outlines of nearby systems. There's movement near the edge of the asteroid field, unidentified. They're not broadcasting any transponder codes. Maybe they forgot to RSVP, I offered. Marvin's image flickered again. They match a partial signature we've seen before. Royal Inquisition ships, but distorted, like they've been altered. Altered how? Illyra asked, suddenly sharper. Spliced, augmented, possibly, Marvin hesitated, which was never a good sign. Possibly Saravari tech integration. She stiffened. That's impossible. The Saravari systems were designed to reject forced bonding. The interface can't survive without consent. I held up a hand. Did you just say your tech practices inform consent? She didn't answer, but her expression said yes, and also possibly that I was missing the point. I stepped closer to the console. If someone's forcing Saravari tech into Inquisition ships, that means they've found pieces of the old Empire's cores. Or worse, stolen them. And they're trying to weaponize it, she finished. The station vibrated slightly beneath our feet, like it didn't like the sound of that. They're coming here, Marvin said. Or at least to this sector. The growth patterns suggest they're tracking something. You, I said to Illyra. No, she replied. Not just me. The ship, this station. They want to find the original core. It's still the most complete piece of Saravari design left in the quadrant. If they get it, I'm guessing they won't use it to install a better beverage dispenser. She turned away from the console, the glow of the map still dancing over her face. We have to protect it, and we need allies. You say that like we have a bunch of those sitting in the glove compartment. There are others, she said. Other exiles, survivors of the fall. They scattered after the Empire dissolved, hiding from the Inquisition. Some of them will still answer a royal call. Marvin's eyes flickered. You're suggesting we use the signal array. It's what it's for. It hasn't been used in over 200 cycles. It might summon more than just Saravari exiles. Predators could track it. Let them, she said, voice hard. It's time someone reminded the galaxy who we were. I vote for doing that without attracting space monsters, I said, but I was already moving to help her. Because somehow I knew this was the part where the story stopped being quiet. The array chamber hadn't been touched in years. Dust, actual dust, on a ship that recycled air through molecular filters, coated the walls. The equipment was dormant, its design archaic compared to the rest of the evolving ship. This was ancient even by Saravari standards. It looked more like a temple than a transmission center. Illyra placed her hand on the main amulet. No, not amulet. Console. Definitely console. The lights flickered on. Do you want me to say anything? I asked. Like a tagline? Something cool and defiant? Just don't touch anything, she muttered. I stepped back. She closed her eyes and began to hum. It wasn't a song. Not really, but it had structure. Resonance. Notes that weren't notes. Phrases made of light and thought. The array responded. Panels lit up. Glyphs danced, and the room filled with a harmonic vibration that made my fillings itch. When she opened her eyes again, they were silver, not a glow, a transformation. She whispered something, and the array pulsed outward. A ripple of intent stretched across stars. It's done, she said. What did you say? She looked at me. I asked them to come home. Outside, the stars didn't answer, but I had a feeling they were listening. The knock came at a completely inappropriate hour, assuming you still trusted the ship's concept of time, which had recently decided that night meant soft pink lighting and ambient harp music. I had just convinced myself that a nap was not a sign of cowardice when the door whispered open. Not a Lyra. Instead, a creature that looked like it had been designed by a committee of paranoid engineers and overly creative taxidermists hovered in the hallway. It had no visible eyes, 6 limbs, 5 of which were holding gifts, and emitted a polite whirring sound that translated into, "I am here for the gathering." I blinked at it once, then twice, then turned toward Marvin's projection behind me. "Was there a memo I missed?" Marvin nodded, glowing faintly green. "Several, actually. You dismissed them all as spam, because they were titled Bloodlines Convergence Reception RSVP. I thought it was a scam, the kind where you accept and wake up missing your wallet and half your liver." Marvin shrugged. "To be fair, that still might happen." The creature, whose name was apparently Zerk, according to the softly pulsing tag hovering over its head, stepped politely around me and entered the room, depositing its gifts in a very symmetrical pattern on my desk. One looked suspiciously like a weapon. One hummed. One tried to crawl away. "So the call worked," I said, shutting the door with a sigh. "We're officially hosting the galaxy's strangest family reunion." Zerk chirped, gave a very enthusiastic 3-arm salute, and wandered off in the direction of the ship's makeshift assembly chamber, which Marvin had hastily repurposed from a former cargo bay. It now featured mood lighting, tables of ambiguous height, and somehow an ice sculpture. I found Elira standing at the far end of the bay, flanked by 2 tall figures wrapped in flowing silver cloth. Her ears twitched as I approached, the familiar sign of nerves barely hidden beneath layers of poise. She nodded to me without turning. "Zerk arrived," I said. "Tried to gift me what I'm 60% sure is a sentient potato." "Be polite," she murmured. "He's a bloodkin from the Varelian cluster. They store memories in root vegetables." Suddenly, my mother's cooking makes more sense. She turned then, something like a smile brushing across her mouth. "They came. I wasn't sure they would. Some of these people haven't seen another Saravari in decades. And yet they all remember the dress code." I gestured at the crowd slowly gathering in the chamber. Figures of all shapes and adaptations, but each bearing some trace of the Saravari aesthetic. Elegant metallic threads, bioluminescent accents, jewelry coated with family glyphs. "I told them this might be the last chance," Elira said, "before the Inquisition reaches this quadrant, before we disappear completely." "Cheery thought," I said, picking up a drink from a passing tray. It was blue, it bubbled. I didn't ask. "So what now? Do we sit in a circle and sing the anthem? Stage a surprise uprising?" "They don't know why they're really here yet," she said quietly. "I needed them to come first. The truth would have scared them away." "And what's the truth?" She looked me in the eye and there was no humor left. "The Inquisition has already reached the outer moons. They're using corrupted cores to track us. They've learned how to fake the signal." I felt that in my stomach, the twist of inevitability, the thrum of oncoming disaster. "Then we need to tell them," I said. "These people have a right to know they're being hunted." "Not yet. They'll scatter. Or worse, fight each other. Too many rival houses, too much bad history. We need to unify them first." "Through a mixer?" "Through tradition." That's when I realized what the circular platform in the center of the room was for. Not dancing, not speaking, dueling. "Of course," I muttered. "Nothing says interstellar diplomacy like ritual combat." Elira stepped onto the platform. The lights shifted. Conversations around the room dimmed into silence. The crowd moved toward her like gravity itself was bending in her direction. When she spoke, her voice carried not just across the room, but through the ship. The station amplified it, made it resonate, not loud but deep, like it belonged to someone who had once commanded fleets and stars alike. "Blood of Saravari," she said. "I call the right of Emberlight. Witness and remember." There was a moment of stillness, then a figure stepped forward, tall, armored in black and red, their face half covered by a gleaming mask. "I accept," they said, "on behalf of House Kevrith." Elira nodded once. No hesitation. The two of them took positions at either end of the platform. Marvin appeared beside me, his hologram sipping something from a cup that didn't exist. "Betting pools open?" "Not appropriate." "Odds are skewed anyway." Elira's favored 3-1. The fight wasn't a brawl, it was a dance. The weapons, light daggers shaped like flowing ribbons, moved with the fighters, tracking the motion of thought and emotion. It was beautiful, terrifying. Elira fought like someone who didn't just know her body. She knew gravity, timing, the flow of momentum. Her opponent was skilled, she was inevitable. The match ended with her blade at their throat and her breath steady. "Yield," she said. They did. She helped them up. The crowd roared, not wild, not frenzied, but with recognition. She wasn't just another exile anymore. She was the princess. Later, after the crowd had begun eating questionable appetizers and forming alliances over sparkling blue drinks, Elira stood beside me at the viewport. "They'll follow now," she said. "They've seen I haven't forgotten who I am. And you didn't vaporize anyone during introductions. Always a plus." She glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "You've stayed through this." "I'm not going anywhere." A pause, then, "You might have to." "Why?" "Because if I fail, this station becomes a tomb, and you're the only one here who never signed up to die for it." I shook my head. Too late. I already accepted a drink from Jerk. Culturally, I think that makes me his emergency contact. Her laugh was quiet, tired, but real. Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered, and somewhere far beyond them, ships with red glowing cores were closing in. The station groaned like a hungover leviathan as the enemy ships broke through the outer perimeter, their distorted cores pulsing red against the void. Alarms wailed, less dramatically than I expected, honestly. Marvin had replaced the standard klaxon with what he called a more tasteful chime. It sounded like an elevator arriving in a spa. "We're under attack," I said, strapping myself into the secondary console seat with the grace of someone who had absolutely no training and was hoping the chair wouldn't eject him for incompetence. "And yet I feel oddly relaxed." Elira didn't look up. Her fingers danced across the interface, coaxing the station's old systems to life, with a whisper of energy that pulsed from her skin like the ship recognized her heartbeat. "That's because the station likes you now. You made it laugh." I fell down an elevator shaft. "It still counts." We were outnumbered. 17 ships, all Inquisition modified, their Saravari graphs warped and crackling with unstable energy. It was like watching a graveyard try to come back to life. Wrong, unnatural, and getting closer. The gathered exiles, once wary, now united, had taken positions across the station, manning weapons, activating dormant defenses, rerouting power through circuits that hadn't glowed in decades. Jerk was leading a small team of biocrafters through the lower levels, splicing emergency healing spores into the ventilation system. He'd offered me one earlier, just in case. It tried to climb into my ear. I politely declined. "Communications array is ready," Marvin chirped. "Do we want to say anything intimidating? I can simulate a voice that sounds like a chorus of thunderous whales." "Tempting," I said, watching the red blips on the screen draw closer. "But I think this time we speak plainly." Elira nodded. "Patch me through." Marvin's voice changed. "You're live in 3, 2. "To the ships in orbit," Elira said, calm as the eye of a storm. "This is Princess Elira of the Saravari bloodline. You're approaching a protected sanctuary under the right of ancestral code. If you continue on this path, you will not be met with diplomacy. You will be met with memory, and it will not be kind." There was silence, then static, then a voice low and full of cruel amusement. "You are the memory," Emmett said. "We are the future." I looked at Elira. "Well, they've been reading the Evil Overlord handbook." She didn't smile, but her eyes gleamed with something older than rage. "Then let them see what the past remembers." When the first beam struck our outer shields, the station responded not with a shield, but with song. Resonant harmonics pulsed through the hull, an echo of the signal Elira had used days earlier, but amplified, weaponized. The melody fractured the enemy's systems, not with force, but with dissonance. Their stolen Saravari tech screamed in rebellion. Panels cracked, lights stuttered. "They're losing cohesion," Marvin said. "The bonded cores are rejecting them, like bad organ transplants." "Gross analogy," I muttered, "but I'll take it." The exiles launched a counteroffensive, not with brute firepower, but with precision, hacking into the enemy ships through familiar frequencies, turning their stolen weapons against each other. One by one, the red blips blinked out, their ships either retreating or shattering like cheap glass. And then it was just one, the largest, the flagship. It didn't fire. Instead, it sent a single message. "We are not done," Illyra stepped forward. "Neither am I." She extended her hand toward the console, and I saw it. Not just her skin, but her entire presence shimmer. The station answered, not as a machine, but as something alive. The pulse of light surged outward, a wave of energy, not violent, but final. The enemy ship cracked, not from explosion, but from unraveling. Its corrupted core, unable to reconcile with the call of its true origin, folded in on itself and vanished. Silence returned. Real silence. Not the tense kind. The kind that felt like the breath before a new sentence. Later, after the station had calmed, after the injured were treated, and the lights stopped flickering like they were trying to give us seizures, I found Illyra on the observation deck. She wasn't glowing anymore. She looked tired, real, still beautiful in that alien way, with her long ears twitching slightly as I approached. "You saved them," I said. "No," she replied. "They saved themselves. I just reminded them who they were." I leaned on the railing beside her. "You ever going to tell me what the ship did to me that night? It bonded with me?" She glanced sideways, lips twitching. "You can't handle that kind of intimacy." I had a very intense dream about being turned into a toaster. It considered it, briefly. We were quiet for a while. Then I said, "So, what happens now? You rebuild the Saravari, find a throne, reclaim a planet?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe we build something new, something better. Not a throne, a home." "And me?" I asked, trying to sound casual, failing. She looked at me, really looked. "You stay if you want. I can't promise safety or peace, but I can promise meaning, and probably more weird gifts from Zerk." He gave me a sweater. "It vibrates when I lie." "Useful." I smiled, then looked out at the stars. They didn't seem as cold anymore. And somewhere deep inside me, maybe in the part the ship had touched, I knew we weren't just surviving anymore. We were becoming. Illyra reached for my hand, and for once I didn't flinch. The stars waited. But this time, we would meet them on our terms. The end.